This is a bit of an overdue response to Ella, who is apparently done with me. That fact notwithstanding, I'll make the video. Maybe she'll watch it, maybe not. Either way, take it away, Ella.
Jessica, I have one thing to say to you.
Work! Now turn to the left.
I have one thing to say. Sachet, Shantae, 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 Shantae. Woo!
Oh, we're not doing a RuPaul video. Carry on.
I took your argument at first quite seriously, but then I considered, you know what? Basically what you're using here is the Reed method of interviews slash interrogations with other people. It is classic. It's classic. It's a classic method, and it's not going to work on me.
To give you an idea of what it's like to be me, standing here, hearing you say that, I'll just throw out an analogy that'll make sense for everyone. Suppose you and I were talking about the Transformers movies, and you're giving me your critique. I liked this part, I liked that part, this part wasn't done so well, could have been done better, this part wasn't done well, but it didn't really matter much. And then you round out your analysis by saying, but the one thing that ruined it was the fact that they shot it in sepia tones. That didn't work for me. And some third party's ear perks up and says, what? And you go, well, it's a classic technique, sepia tones. And the person says, well, yeah, sepia tones is a classic technique, but they didn't use it in this video. It was full color. For similar reasons, it's true to say that the Reed method is a classic technique in the United States. It's false to say that I was using it, because I wasn't. There are some vital components to the use of that method, which are absent on YouTube. As you noted, it's used for interrogations and interviews, neither of which is a video I make on YouTube. It's neither an interview nor an interrogation. Part of the Reed method is behavioral analysis, a part of which in particular is delivering information to a person and seeing how they react. Some reactions we have are culturally contingent, some are biologically determined, and some are hybrids. I'll give you some examples. The way people gesticulate, that's culturally contingent, it's not biologically determined. And here's a video, go watch it, it's about 5 minutes long, just watch a few minutes of it, you don't need to watch the whole thing. And pay attention to that officer. If you're not very observant, or you don't know what you're looking for, he looks like he's having a normal conversation, just talking, his hands are doing, but that's not really what's happening. He moves in a very particular way each time, and that's one of the tricks to this particular kind of ready position. It approximates the way that normal people will discuss things, but it isn't. This is actually a very aggressive position for this officer to be in. It just doesn't look like it. This officer is ready to throw down right now. I mean, he is the slightest misstep, and he's going to spring into action. He's got his body canted. His non-gun hand is the one that does the gesticulating. His gun hand stays close to his body, elbow over his firearm, and then non-gun hand is always between gun hand and an assailant, or the potential assailant. So if the guy does decide to attack, you throw out your weak hand while you're getting to your gun, so that way it can't be overridden. He's got his weight distributed on his feet. He's canted. His firearm's on the far side of his body from this person. These little things that someone who's trained in observing behaviors will notice, and it's things that the average person isn't going to notice, because it's close enough to looking like just how someone would stand if they're talking, that it doesn't have any of the, it just doesn't look like it's anything other than normal, and yet it is anything but normal. Okay, so other cultures, for instance, if you want to think of, since we're talking about the skeptical heretic, he did a video where he's talking about telephones in Korea. If you don't know anything about the Korean culture, the fact that it's based on Confucian principles, then the certain ways that particular people interact with each other is not going to give you any information. But if you're aware that it's a hierarchical society that works on there are 5 principles. It's a relationship of husband to wife, master to slave, father to son, older brother to younger brother, and then equals. If you don't know that, then particular kinds of ways they interact, the way, for instance, if they're tendering money or who's pouring the drink and how they're pouring it, tells you about the respective position these people are in. That may or may not be useful, but in certain contexts it is useful. What is relevant here is not whether in any particular case, or in all cases, whether or not it's important to know that. The trick is to be aware of it and to notice these things when they're happening, and understand that there's a reason behind it, that these people are acting in this particular way, and if you know what you're looking for, it gives you some information. It's limited, It's not dispositive, but it's information nevertheless. And if you're someone like me, it's important that you be able to catch on to this as it's happening. In some cases, because if you don't, if you fail to pick up on certain kinds of behaviors, people can die, to include yourself. Not usually, but sometimes. And because the price for failure can be death, you want to be very good about noticing these things. For instance, the way they hand someone an item. If they'll hand with their right hand, and if the person to whom they're handing it is higher up on the hierarchy than they are, or they're showing this person a great deal of respect, it's going to determine where their left hand goes. Also, in the United States, when we want someone to come here, we do this. Not true around the world. It'll look like, if you don't know what you're looking for, it'll look like what we do for shoo. Ilawa, ilawa, but that's actually their version of come here. It's important to understand these things when you're an observer of people, when you need to be good at that. Because you can watch what these people are doing, and if you know something about their culture, it's telling you a little bit about their mindset and what they're up to, like it is with that police officer. If I'm interacting with someone, and they adopt that kind of position, like that officer did, I know that this person is trained. That tells me something. If I have to fight this guy, I know that it's going to be a fight, that he's not going to be a pushover. I need to be on my game. Further, I know that he considers me to be something of a threat, which means that I'm doing something that's putting this person ill at ease. Those are entirely culturally contingent. Now you have hybrid issues like smiling. It's hardwired. Blind people will smile. Anybody will smile when there's something that pleases them or when they're laughing, but it's something that you can fake. But then there are things that are biologically determined that can't be faked, like particular ways the eyes move when something is happening or not happening. That just cannot be faked. And if you're not trained, if you don't know what you're looking for, you probably won't catch this. But if you're the careful observer, or you're trained in it or whatever, and you're aware of this, you can watch it, and it gives you some information about what's going on when you're talking to someone. And I'll just give you a quick example that you can test at home. The human eye cannot track smoothly an object that doesn't exist. That might sound like, well, duh, you can't track something that doesn't exist. What do you mean? If you want to pan across the room, left to right, or right to left, up or down, and you don't have an object to follow as it crosses your field of vision, up or down, left or right, or any other angle, the eye cannot track smoothly. It will jerk as it goes. So just try it. Just try to go slow and move in a smooth motion, and it won't happen. You'll go from like this point to that 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 point. Might be useful to know in some situations, not in others. But if, say, we're talking, and I see that you are, panning your eyes behind me. I don't necessarily know what's behind me, but if you were to say something like, "Gosh, what's that?" as your eyes are panning left to right or whatever, and it's not a smooth motion, then I know that what is happening here is that this person is trying to redirect my attention away from them. They're trying to get me to turn. Maybe that's to leave me vulnerable. Maybe that's so they can secrete some object somewhere or something. But it's a piece of information that lets me know that this is not a person who I want to leave to his own devices. I want to pay even more attention to this person because he has just tried to deceive me. Maybe useful, maybe not useful. But if you don't know that particular fact, then you're not in a position to notice it if and when it ever becomes useful to know. And it actually happens to be useful to know. In fact, you can't smoothly track if there's not an object to track, and the converse of that is certain kinds of substances, the person can't smoothly track an object that is there, and that's useful to know. Also, with eyes crossing. Anyway, whatever. These are just kinds of things that someone like me will have been trained in. And depending on what's happening, depends on whether or not it's going to be useful in that particular situation. But not knowing it puts you at a disadvantage. Now, in my previous video, though I don't like repeating myself, I do repeat myself, in particular, to drive home points to people. In the video to which you responded in your long version, I took great pains to point out over and over and over again that the first task for the honest listener, for the intellectually honest person, is to observe, to take in exactly what is happening. Not what they think is happening, not what they imagine might happen next, Not all. The first thing is to be a good observer, a good listener in that case, of exactly what has been said. Part of which is what is logically entailed, that is to say, what is necessarily true, or necessarily following on from what was said. That's important. In your long video to me, you pointed out that, well, you claimed anyway, that I ignored the first part of your video, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I failed to take sufficient account of the beginning part of your video and you gave me a time index. That's not true. In my video, if you pay careful attention to exactly what I said, and you know anything about logic, you will notice that I directed your attention to a part of your video in order to talk about it. And then later in my video, I pointed out very precisely that you were in possession of knowledge that the skeptical heretic does in fact not believe that the government never errs. That he believes, he accepts, he thinks that the government does, at least from time to time, make errors. A fortiori, it follows. That is to say, once I've established that you are aware of a fact, one can determine for an even stronger reason than that fact that you believe it. Because people don't go around disbelieving things they know to be true. So I spoke about what you know. I didn't limit it to just the much weaker claim of what you believed. I dealt with what you in fact know, namely in that the skeptical heretic has at least one time conceded that the government does make an error. Inasmuch as you accept that as true, that you know that particular fact, there's an even stronger reason to know that you believe that the skeptical heretic does not think that the government is flawless. That is to say, that once I've established the thing that logically necessitates the other thing, I don't need to go say the other thing too. That's the point of structuring an argument in such a way, so that way it takes care of all the points. A careful listener, an honest listener, a precise listener, will notice that. You are not in that class of person. You are different from that class of person. You hear what you want to hear, and you fail to hear what you don't want to hear. Now, that said, in the same way that when you were taking issue with my video, you pointed out some time index to me where I could have gone to the beginning of your video to pay attention. Instead of making a video telling the skeptical heretic that what he needs to do is to come out and prominently proclaim that he does not think that the government fails to make error, that he thinks that the government makes errors from time to time, you should have done to the people who have who've drawn the inference or that implication you claim is out there. You should say to those people, no. He has in fact already said that the government does make mistakes from time to time. Here's a time index. Here's a time index. Instead of correcting the people who are wrong, you are saying that the guy who's already said what you're saying he needs to say many, many times, you're saying that he needs to keep iterating that point. Apparently to compensate for the mental deficiencies of the people who didn't understand it when he said it, or who did not pay attention to his work. In either case, you're pointing that out to them, saying, hey, you're wrong. Here's how you know you're wrong. Check here, check here, check here, here, and here. Don't make the mistake anymore. I made a video some time back, I'll put a link to it below. It's called This Briefing is Unclassified. And in it I was taking issue with some of the classification that's happening in the government. The skeptical heretic left on that video a comment substantially in the forum saying, I completely agree here, the classification system by the government is being abused. Words to that effect. A few minutes later, Skid Row Radio also showed up on that same video and said pretty much, well, he didn't say the same thing. He said either great video, good video, or excellent video, something. Anyway, the video, he gave a positive review saying, essentially, you did well, which I took to mean something like, I agree with it. That was within just a couple of minutes after Skeptical Heretic left his comment. I'm just saying, it's not as though the information's not out there. It is. And these people, some of whom are taking Skeptical Heretic to task, move in some of the same circles, and they participate in the same conversation sections. So I'm at a loss to understand how they could possibly be ignorant of the fact that Skeptical Heretic thinks that the government makes mistakes from time to time. Because he has repeatedly said just that very thing. But instead of you're correcting the people who are wrong, you insist that the person who's right needs to keep saying it over and over again. And that's why I said that your video was little more than strategic legerdemain. And by the way, I'm so fucking sorry that the word legerdemain was apparently a thing for people. My bad. It's strategic sleight of hand. You are in possession of knowledge that he does not think what you're claiming the implication or the inference is that some of these people have. You are aware of that. I now know that you're capable of citing to time indexes on videos. You should be saying that to them rather than saying to him he needs to scream it even louder than he already has. Have a great day there, sport.